Right. Okay, good morning. Good morning, everybody. Lovely to see you all. We are in a series called Literally. And it's all about the stories of the Old Testament. The history, which in other words is his story. Okay? History is his story. It's all about Jesus. And so this series, we don't know how many years we're going to be teaching this series, but it's going to be good because it's really varied. Because it's just the idea is that when we reference Samuel or reference Jonah or when we talk about Adam and Eve, that the people are aware of who we're referencing. Yeah. So we believe the Word of God to be the literal Word of God. It is His breathed word given to us. It's a message of love. It's one story, and it's all about Jesus. And so this message is called Dreamland, and it begins with sibling rivalry. I'm not sure if anyone's ever experienced sibling rivalry, but this is sibling rivalry at its worst because they sell their brother into slavery. That's how bad it gets. When your kids are like kicking off, it's nothing compared to Joseph's story. So this dream world, is all about Joseph. Joseph we find at the end of the patriarchs. We've got Jacob, who's the last of the patriarchs. You've got Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then Jacob has 13 children. He has 12 sons and one poor daughter who has to compete with all those brothers. And these will later on become the 12 tribes of Israel. And Joseph is one of those sons. So it's found right here. Yeah, patriarchs before the Exodus. It's actually through Joseph, all of his family are going to end up in Egypt. This is the way they arrive in Egypt. It's through Joseph. And then you have 400 years of slavery, and then the Exodus and Moses and the Promised Land, etc. That's the time period. I'm going to do that for every session, okay, basically. Get through the history. Right, this is found in Genesis 37, and I've got a lot to cover because his life covers about 13 chapters. 13 chapters of Genesis. Genesis covers a massive period of time. And Joe, he takes up a whole bunch of space in Genesis. So very important. Right, so diving in, Genesis 37. Jacob lived in the land, this is verse 1. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. Yeah, various wives, not great, but there you go. And he brought their father a bad report about them. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons. Favoritism never good, causes problems, but hey, here we have it. He loved Joseph more than all the rest because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made an ornate robe for him. Joseph in the Technicolor dream coat, yeah? This is the ornate robe that he had. Yeah? When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph had a dream. And when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain in the field, and suddenly a sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." Not a great little dream and interpretation. Basically, he's telling his brothers, yeah, my name is going to be up there and you're all going to worship me. You're all going to be bowing down to me. You're going to adore me. I mean, and the brothers hated him anyway. And you put that little chestnut out there. So the brothers hated him all the more. He had another dream and he shares that with his dad. And his dad gets a bit hacked off with it as well. And he says, what? The sun and the moon are going to... What are you talking about, Joseph? Like, seriously. So we have Joseph. He has these dreams from God about what God is going to do in his life. And he shares that with everybody. So he lacked quite a bit of wisdom there, probably in his young age. Yeah. Now his brothers were very jelly of him. They didn't like, all of this focus that he had. They didn't like his he got all the best stuff, yeah, the Nike shoes, the Air Max, and they're like, what? You know what? His dad sends Joseph off to get a message to his brothers out in the field. And they're shepherds, so they travel quite large distances. And he goes chasing off after them, and they see him from afar. And the brothers, they all say, oh, here comes that dreamer. Here comes that dreamer. I've had it up to here with that dreamer. Let's kill him. That's the sibling rivalry. They're like, let's do him in. I've had enough of this. That's how angry they were. And one of the brothers says, no, let's not do that. Let's just put him in a pit, and then we can sell him to whoever comes along, and we can make some money from this. Now, he said that because later on he wanted to go and rescue him and get him back to dad. But actually the brothers thought, hey, this is a great idea. They grab him, they throw him into the cistern, and then at some point some merchants come along and they sell Joseph to these merchants who are on their way to Egypt. And when the brother who wanted to save him comes back, he's like, what the heck? Where's Joe? They're like, here's your share of the money. 20 shekels of silver. Here's your share of the money. And he's like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? So they go back to their father and they say, he's dead. And they have his ornate cloth, his robe, and they dip it in blood, in an animal blood, and they give it to Jacob. And Jacob breaks down and he's like, my son, and he's basically inconsolable. He's just, his favourite son is no longer. But Joseph has been taken to Egypt with these merchants. He's sold into slavery. They saw him in the distance before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. Here comes that dreamer. Let's kill him, throw him into one of these cisterns, and then say a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams. Wow, they really wanted to go at him. Okay. Judah said to his brothers, what shall we gain if we kill our brother, cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother. Thanks. Let's just sell him. Because, let's be kind. Let's just sell him. Okay. So he's sold to these travelling merchants. And then it says, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. So Joseph then finds himself, from being the favourite son, he's crying out to his brothers, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. They sell him into slavery, and then he's taken on this trip to Egypt, and he ends up being sold as a slave to Potiphar. And Potiphar is one of Pharaoh's chief advisors. He's one of the politicians of the day. So Joseph finds himself in this household, and he's a slave in this household. Genesis 39, the Lord was with Joseph, and he prospered. He lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favour in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of all his household and all that he owned. The Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So Potiphar left everything in Joseph's care. And Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything. So Joseph comes and goes now. I mean, we don't know exactly how long he was in this house as he would have been the entry slave. He would have been the last one in, and he's got all the terrible jobs to begin with. But then the Lord is with him and prospers him. And in slavery, he rises to become more powerful than your average Joe who's in the land. He's in a very, very privileged household. He's got basically he can interact and deal with the cream of society, and he's got a position of authority. Basically, Potiphar says, whatever you do, it's got my blessing. So Joseph comes and goes, and when he comes and goes, they go, here's Potiphar's fella. Whatever he wants, basically Potiphar wants. Potiphar's really powerful, so Joseph is really powerful. He's under authority, but he comes and goes, and whilst he serves and does everything, he still has basically access to all of that stuff. So he is actually in a very, very privileged position. He is a slave. We can't get rid of that. But actually, society would look at him as, if that guy speaks, we pay attention. Unfortunately, it says this: Joseph was well built and handsome. Now, for those of us who are well built and handsome, we will understand the difficulties that brings. After a while, his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, "Come to bed with me." Crap. Everything's going great, and then all of a sudden, he's faced with this massive temptation. This massive temptation. Because Potiphar's wife sets eyes on him and says, "Hey, you and me." Potiphar is out and about doing his own thing. We can get it on. And Joseph's response is he resists again and again. He's like, no, I can't do that. And his response is, how can I sin against God and how can I sin against my master Potiphar? That's his response. Now, we don't know how long that goes on for, that he's resisting, but at some point, she says, "Come to bed with me." She grabs his cloak, his tunic, and whips it off. And he goes rushing out. That's the way that he deals with temptation. He flees. Which is a flipping good way of dealing with temptation. We're all tempted. I kid you not. We are all tempted. How do we deal with it? Bring it on. No, you don't stand and fight against temptation. You flee. Joseph flees. Now, she's really upset at this. And when Potiphar gets home, she says, "That Hebrew slave, he tried to get it on with me." And he accuses him of a sexual assault. He tried to rape me. Now, Potiphar is thinking, Joseph, oh gosh, Joseph, really Joseph? Like my favoured, like everything is great and I don't have to worry about anything because of Joseph and my wife. Who am I gonna... Now, he may realise that his wife, maybe had that tendency of requesting things of sexual favours. We don't know. Actually, most accusations of rape are genuine. This cry wolf thing is not very often, because when you are accusing somebody of rape, your life is probably going to go through the ringer and then some in order to express that actually this has happened. So, Potiphar, he's in a very difficult position. I just wanted to say that that's the reality that we live in this world. Because lots of people say, "Oh, another Jezebel, cry wolf." No, actually, it's a really, really difficult thing because most rapes will not get to court and they won't be found guilty. That's the reality of this world. Anyway, he's accused of rape and he's put in prison. So he's gone from a slave to a prisoner. He's taken one step down. I mean, this dream that he had, it just keeps going in the opposite direction. When his master heard the story that his wife told him, "This is how your slave treated me," he burned with anger. Joseph's master took him, put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. But while Joseph was there in the prison, the Lord was with him, showed him kindness, granted him favour in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put everything in Joseph's care. He was in charge of all the prison. He was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care. Like Potiphar before, just Joseph's got it. Joseph's got it. In the prison now, Joseph's got it. The Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. During that time, 2 prisoners arrive. The cupbearer of Pharaoh and Pharaoh's favourite baker. Warrings, put their put their favourite baker. Unfortunately, you made the muffin wrong or something and ends up in prison. And these two are languishing there in prison, and they both have dreams. And the warden of the prison hears about these dreams and says, "Oh, well, Joseph, he can interpret dreams." So he's clearly, done something there that people know about him. And he hears these dreams and he gives the interpretation to the dreams. And one of them is about 3 vines and the fruit of the vine and being taken and the cup being handed to Pharaoh. And the other one is about wandering along with the breads and the birds coming in and grabbing the bread and then, all my bread. And they say to Joseph, "Can you give us the interpretation?" And he says, "Well, it's not of me, it's of God. But yeah, I can tell you what they mean." And he says, "In 3 days to the cupbearer." The cupbearer is basically one of Pharaoh's main advisors. He tries the wine before Pharaoh. He tries the food before Pharaoh, so that if anyone wants to poison the king, they're going to poison the cupbearer. It's a bit of a risky. Doesn't come with a lot of job insurance. Going for the cupbearer right now, yeah. But it's one of the main advisors of the king. Nehemiah later on in the Bible we'll find he is a cupbearer of the king, and it's basically your best friends with the king. So he must have done something to upset the king, and his dream is that you're going to be restored to your position of authority. And the baker, he says, "Oh, how do I tell you this?" He says, "Tell me." He says, "Well, in 3 days you're going to die." I mean, this is really what you don't want to hear, No fortune teller is going to tell you that unless they say, "Pay me first, and then I'll tell you." Yeah. But he says this is what God is saying. And sure enough, the baker, so what he did must have really upset the king, and he dies, and Pharaoh restores the cupbearer. But Joseph says to him, when you get back to your place, please remember me. And unfortunately, the cupbearer, he forgot. Genesis chapter 40. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. Now, 2 years later. Thanks, mate. 2 years. You forgot about it for 2 years. 2 years later, Joseph is still there with looking after everything in the prison. And then Pharaoh has a couple of dreams. He has 2 dreams. And one of them is about heads of grain that there are 7 heads of grain and they look amazing. And then there are 7 heads of grain, like on your cornflakes box, yeah? What does it look like, head of grain? Then the 7 nasty, weak heads of grain come and they swallow up the good heads of grain. And then here's another dream where you've got 7 fat cows and then you have 7 thin cows. I'm not looking at anybody. Just looking at myself, just talking to myself there. and I'm not looking at anyone. And the 7 thin cows consume the 7 fat cows. And he says, "What is this?" And at this point, the cupbearer says, "I know somebody who can interpret that. I know." I forgot about him. I hope he doesn't hold that against me. He says, "There's this guy in prison. His name is Joseph, and he interpreted. Our old friend the baker. You know what happened? And remember what happened to me when you had that? You put me in prison for a bit, and we didn't know if you were going to kill me or not. Remember that?" Well, he said what was going to happen, and that's what happened. So they send for Joseph, and they drag him out, and they get him washed and dressed, and they make him stand in front of Pharaoh. And then Pharaoh says, "I've had this dream, and everybody said that you're the dream catcher. Everyone says that you're the dreamer, you're the interpreter of the dream." And you know what Joseph says? He doesn't go, "Yes, I am, actually. I'm pretty good, pretty accurate. I get it all right." He doesn't say that. He says, "Well, it's not of me, but it's my God. It's my God who can do it. And yes, my God can." So Pharaoh tells him these dreams. And Joseph says, "Okay, what's going to happen is that you're going to have 7 years of plenty. 7 years where it's amazing, and then 7 years where it's going to be absolutely the pits, and a big famine is coming, and you've received 2 dreams because God is saying this is absolutely going to happen. There is no way we're going to avoid this. This is going to happen. And the 7 years of famine will destroy all the 7 years of prosperity, and it's going to be bad where everybody's going to die. He said, your best bet is to start storing up when the good times come, so that you got enough to cope when the bad times come. And it would be good that you have somebody who can do that for you. And Pharaoh hears this, and he believes him, and he says, well, who else has the Spirit of the living God? In this guy, there is the Spirit of the living God. Genesis 41:37. The plan seemed good to Pharaoh and all his officials. So Pharaoh asked them, can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God? So then Joseph is anointed as the leader of Egypt at the right hand of Pharaoh. And Pharaoh takes off his ring, puts on his finger to describe the authority that he has. And he says, basically, the only difference between you and me is name. You have the same power as me. The only difference is obviously I'm your boss. He says, but everyone's going to do whatever you say. And he gives this ex-slave, this ex-accused of rape, he puts him as a king over Egypt, basically. And the dreams that God had given Joseph all those many, many years ago then begin to be fulfilled. And people start honouring him. People start, they were a messed up culture, so they probably started worshipping him. Now, the 7 years of plenty come, and Joseph does exactly. He is a very, very good administrator. And he starts storing up. Everybody's just going, this is amazing. Look at how much food we've got. Look at all the bountiful. This is great. Economy is amazing. I can buy my latest chariot. And Joseph's going, I'm just thinking about what's to come. And he's not really enjoying the 7 years of plenty. He's just thinking about what's coming. And nobody else really recognizes that. But Egypt is going to become a world power. It's going to become the world power because nobody else is going to have the food stored up like Egypt has. All the other nations around are going to come to Egypt begging for food. And they're going to pay Egypt for food. So Egypt is going to become a world power. Why is Egypt going to become a world power? Because of Joseph. Because Joseph knew what was going to happen, and Joseph is in the place of administration there. The famine hits, the people start consuming all of the food that they've had, and they forget about the good times, and then the people begin to die. And that's when they come to Egypt and say, you've got food. And they start to buy. And Jacob, inconsolable Jacob, with his murderous sons, they're also going through it. The people of God are also going through it. Just let that be known. The people of God are also going through it. And Jacob says, Egypt has food. Sons, go and get food. They get sent off to go and buy food, and they come face to face, miraculously, with Joseph. And he recognizes them, but they do not recognize him. And he says, are you guys... He realizes who they are, and he says, right. I mean, maybe he's thinking, I want a bit of payback here. Maybe he's thinking, I want to reveal myself. We don't know exactly what he's thinking, but he says to them, are you guys spies? And they go, no, we're not spies. And he says, right, one of you will stay here so that I know. I think what he was thinking is, I don't want to lose them now. If they head off with all the food, I may never see them again. He says, so I'm going to keep one. I'm going to keep one. Choose one. I'm going to keep one. I think it's Simeon who gets chosen. And then the rest go back. And Jacob goes, where's Simeon? Yeah, we had to leave him behind. What do you mean we had to leave him? Well, the guy who's in charge accused us all of being spies and didn't believe us. And actually, when he asked us, do we have any other brothers? We said, yeah, we have one brother called Benjamin. And he is Dad's new favourite. And Benjamin did not go because Benjamin stays with Dad. I've already lost Joseph. I'm not going to lose Benjamin. And they said, but we need to take Benjamin now if we're going to get any more food and get Simeon back. And Jacob goes, no, I'm not going to lose Benjamin. The food runs out. And he's like, I'm not going to lose Benjamin. And they say, we've got to take Benjamin. Simeon is there. We need to rescue Simeon. And Reuben, the firstborn, the eldest, he says, right, if I don't come back with Simeon, with Benjamin, then my life is forfeit. He intercedes. And finally, Jacob relents and says, right, go, take Benjamin. But I kid you not, I need Benjamin back. They all head back. They come face to face with Joseph again. He sees his brother. And this is his brother from the same mother. He's not a brother from a different mother. He's a brother from the same mother. He's the only one who's both mother and father. It was Rachel who was Jacob's favourite. This is his little brother, and he sees him and he's moved with compassion. But he's also thinking, how am I going to get them? He gives them the food. He does ask them what's going on. He sits them down for a meal, and he actually seats them in their right order, which was really shocking to everybody because they were all different heights and sizes. But he gets it right, and he gives Benjamin an extra portion, and they're all thinking, what's going on? And then he sends them on their way. But he puts the cup that he drinks from, he puts it in Benjamin's satchel. And then he sends his guards after them, and they open all the satchels, and lo and behold, Benjamin has this stolen cup in it, and they all get arrested. And they all come back before Joseph. And at that point, when they're all there, and Judah, one of the brothers, he comes and he intercedes for Benjamin, and he says, I don't know what happened. Benjamin is saying he hasn't done anything. We believe him, but the cup is there. We can't deny the cup is there. Let me stay in his place. Judah wants to intercede for Benjamin. Now, Jesus is of the tribe of Judah. He intercedes for all of us, but that's just a side point. Joseph at that point reveals himself to his brothers. Gets everybody to go away, and he reveals himself. He says, I am Joseph, who you sold into slavery. And they all go, what? And they freak out. They absolutely freak out because Joseph now is the king. Joseph now is there, the right hand of Pharaoh, in charge of all their lives. He can click his fingers and they'll all be imprisoned or killed. I mean, he is that powerful. Amnesty International does not exist yet. He is that powerful. And they all fall at his feet and they plead for mercy. And he picks them up and says, is my father still alive? They say, yeah, he is. He says, go and get him. Bring him here. Everything that we have here in Egypt, I can share with you. I will protect you. I will provide for you. They all freak out and go, please don't kill us. Please have mercy. He says, no, don't worry. What you meant for harm, God meant for good. It's just an incredible, powerful statement there. What you meant to harm me, God meant to provide for all of you. If you hadn't have done all of that, I wouldn't be able to provide for all of you now. And they go and they bring their father and they tell him the awkward news. The awkward, joyful news. He's not actually dead. He's actually like a king in Egypt. And Jacob, I want to see my son. And so they come. And that's how the Israelites end up in Egypt. They'll be there for 400 years. They'll become such a threat because they grow and they prospered that the Egyptians will then turn on them several generations later and will enslave all of them. But we'll come to that on another day. This thing about Joseph, right. First of all, it's all about Jesus. There's lots of these stories in the Old Testament, and they all are what we call types of Christ. They're all little signs, signals that the Bible is all about Jesus. You see, Jesus is the favoured son. He's the only son. Joseph was the favoured son. Joseph was despised and rejected by his own family. Guess what? Jesus was despised and rejected by his own family. Joseph is going to save his entire family. The Bible says anyone who calls on the name of the Lord becomes a child of the living God. And Jesus is going to die for his family. He's going to save his family. Joseph is going to go through hell and high water to gain that salvation. Joseph is going to be sold as a slave and go through prison time before he's restored to his throne. Before he's restored to that plan that God had. He went from slavery to the throne. Jesus went from death to the throne. They were both sold for shekels of silver. Joseph just for 20 and Jesus for 30. But hey, there's just these lots. And there's a whole bunch more. There's this website which has just like 60. And I know you could look at them and go, well, that's. All I'm saying is that there's lots of stuff there. It's all about Jesus. Because Jesus is the main event of the entire Bible. And all of these stories, all of them, they all point towards Jesus. Jesus is the main event. This is just the pre-thing. Okay, my 3 points. Practical lessons. Things don't always pan out the way that we would want them to or we would expect them to. You may receive a prophetic word from God. You may have a prophetic dream about what he's going to do. And usually what's going to happen is the exact opposite. And you just go, what? But you said I was going to be like up there and this great. And here I am in slavery, or here I am in prison, or here I am. The complete opposite of what is happening. Because God's ways are so above our ways. His thoughts are so above our thoughts. And we can get there. We can tune in to the right frequency. But the reality is that usually God's word will come in and his word will test you. And that testing is usually life going in the other direction. So God, says to you, I don't know, a healing is going to come, and then all of a sudden you're encountering other symptoms, or it's getting worse, and you're just like, what? Or God says, this blessing is coming, and then the opposite comes. God says, I'm going to surround you with lots of people, and then all of a sudden everybody abandons you, and you're going, what? But God is moving. That's all we can know. God is moving. Whatever is happening, and God fulfills his promises. So the first thing is that things don't always pan out the way that we would expect or hope. And it can cause questions like, God, where are you? What are you doing? But that's all right. He's producing faith. The second thing is that God is moving through all of that adversity and doing things. You see, when Pharaoh calls Joseph to take charge of his land, he's not putting a nobody in charge of his nation. He's not just grabbing somebody because they have a dream. I've got a dream. Yes, elect me, Prime Minister. I've got a great dream. He's not just picking a dreamer. He's picking somebody who knows very well the culture. He's picking somebody who speaks various languages. He's picking somebody who has been trained by the best and has experienced the worst. Because he's been in Potiphar's house and he was learning administration and he was learning politics and he was learning how to manage lots of wealth. And then he was in prison dealing with the worst issues of society. And with the very difficult people, the rejected ones. And he was managing all of that. You don't think that God was thinking about the end game when he was in the house, managing the house, or when he was in the prison, managing the prison? All of that leads up to where Joseph's gonna be. So he is working in the time of slavery. He is working in the time of prison care. And he's doing a preparation work in Joseph so that when he becomes the prime minister, he has all the tools that he needs for the job. So when you're facing that adversity, don't think it's a wasted time. God's just developing. God's just working. The third thing, after, it doesn't always pan out how you expect. God is working through all the adversity. The third thing is it will either break you or it will make you. You see, under pressure and under time, you will either end up with coal, or under pressure and under time, you can end up with a diamond. Under pressure and under time. Under pressure. You'll either end up with coal or you'll end up with a diamond. You see, his heart was always, I want to honour God. Even when his brothers sold him and his brothers come begging for mercy. You know, he had in his hands the ability to destroy all of Egypt. He had the ability to destroy all of the Israelites. He could have taken them out in one moment. He could have said, you know what, those brothers, kill them all. He could have destroyed 11 of the 12 tribes of Israel. He had that in his hands. If he'd have had an angry, vengeful spirit, he could have just annihilated all of Jacob's sons. Just left him and his sister. Maybe Benjamin would have been all right. But he says to them, you meant me harm, but God meant it for good. So his heart remains towards God and towards the others one of real love. One of real love. You don't get that type of love without God. You don't. You don't go through that hardship that he went through, that pain and trauma. Let's not minimize what he suffered. The suffering servant who becomes a king. That sounds very much like my king. That sounds very much like my Jesus. All the trauma he went through, but he did it for good. Hurts and wounds. Joseph overcame all of that, and God lifts him up to be in charge of the kingdom. So these are the practical lessons for us. I just want to invite everybody, close your eyes. We're gonna finish now. Because whatever you're going through, I love the story of Joseph. I really, really do. And it has nothing to do with Jason Donovan. It's because I absolutely love his story of rejection and pain and hardship, and how God spoke to him but restored him, and how he went through all of that with such a heart for God. With such a heart for God. And I just hope that I can compare to 10% of the heart that he had. Because I'm not sure whether I could forgive my brothers for doing that. Maybe you are experiencing something, some form of rejection, some sort of pain, some sort of trauma, some sort of agony that you've gone through. And like Joseph's brothers, they don't deserve forgiveness. They don't deserve it. They did not deserve forgiveness. But Joseph can only come to the kingdom if he has that heart before God. So, what God would say to us is, be free of that agony, be free of that torment, be free of that pain, be free of that burden that holds you down, that ties you down, that lives rent-free in your head. Be free of that. Be free of that. God, help us forgive. Help us have the heart of God. Help us have his mind. When things don't pan out the way that we would want them to, Lord, give us grace. Give us grace, and give us that spiritual insight to know that, God, you are moving. That you are doing something. God, your heart upon our lives.